we are recording this event so that it may be shared for those who weren't able to attend today. So the Southern Bus Rapid Transit Corridor is part of a regional strategy to increase transit use. Other corridors have been studied previously. In the coming months, both the Southern Corridor between downtown Raleigh and Gardner Station Boulevard, and also the Western BRT Corridor from downtown Raleigh and downtown Cary will be addressed. And then I'll turn it over to Hannah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So this is an outline of the process. The project was initiated earlier this fall. And the work that the project team has been doing so far has been to understand the foundation set by previous plans, but also start looking into kind of existing conditions along the corridor and starting our conversations with the community. So from here, we're going to be investigating plans for the areas around the proposed BRT station locations, and we'll be coming back to the community at a few other points to get feedback. So I'll hand it over to Chris to talk more about the BRT process.
Great, thank you. I'm going to pull up the next set of slides here and get going with those. Okay, let me just hit full screen here. Okay, we wanted to step back and maybe just give a little background on bus rapid transit itself. You know, many people are really familiar with the background to the bus rapid transit proposal, but every meeting we have, we always try and step back in case there's somebody who's kind of less familiar who has just joined the process. Sorry, I'm going to have to escape from this for a second. You can see my issue with this deck. Actually, Julia, can you pull up your version?
Sure.
Why don't we do that? And I'll just say next, which will be annoying, but let's do that one. I can see there's a glitch in my deck.
That would be fine.
Okay.
So are we seeing the deck still?
Next. Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, this one. Great. Thank you. Thanks for your patience with that. So we wanted to make sure everybody had, you know, the same level of information around bus rapid transit. So the, you know, what's distinctive about this and why it's kind of special and has the potential for great, you know, benefit to communities, businesses along the Southern Corridor is because this is a bus system which essentially allows people to move more quickly through the corridor and add transit capacity to the corridor as a whole. So, and Raleigh has been looking at a series of corridors around the city in each direction as a way to really kind of help address transportation and sustainability issues across the city as a whole. But really what's distinctive here is you have distinct vehicles, they're specialized, they're larger, they have multiple doors so people can get on and off at many different points along the vehicle. They often will travel in dedicated lanes for much of their journey, which means they're not held up by existing traffic. They can advance traffic signals so they can move forward more quickly. They also can offer more frequent service. The stations are significantly enhanced over regular kind of curbside poles and signs. And there's the potential that you can pay the fare before you get on. So all of this means that the vehicles can move much more quickly and carry many more people in a higher quality transit experience. Okay, go next. And, you know, there are wider benefits to this. It really is about connecting members of the community to jobs. But it's not only commuting, it's also about accessing education resources. It could be health, it could be shopping, all of the things that people need to access in their daily lives. It also means that people are less dependent on their cars, that they can, in fact, walk to bus rapid transit, they can bike to it, and then move around the city in that way. It means that the immediate areas around stations can be less car dependent, that people can move without cars and also save money by not having the cost of vehicles. That can also improve air quality and kind of contribute to sustainability goals. Okay, go next. The background as well is that there are two corridors that are being looked at the same time: Western Boulevard and also the Southern Corridor from downtown Raleigh to Ghana. And this process is looking at station area planning. So there is a parallel process that is looking at the engineering design of BRT, but this group is really looking at what's the potential benefit that could be gained in station areas. And station areas are that 5 and 10-minute walk around where the future BRT stations would be. We're really interested in first and last mile mobility, how people can get around, land use and urban design considerations. So what's the potential future shape of any new development that may happen, how we can support existing businesses and make sure that there is benefit to them in the future. Also looking at housing questions, both affordability issues, access to affordable housing, and addressing any displacement considerations. And as we go through this, looking to be as open and equitable in the engagement process as we can be. Next. So how do we get here? So that's the system. Those are the routes we're looking at. So we go next. There's big picture here. The Raleigh and the region is just growing. It's been almost exponential the last 20 years, the rate of growth. So with many more people coming into the region and into the city, we're looking to find ways that we can move people around more effectively. Next. And of course, as the city is growing, that's driving residential growth and business growth, and it also obviously has impacts in terms of the housing market and puts pressure on the market in some ways. It has been increasing rent values and sales values, but that's really all part of the context of the city being the one of the second fastest metro areas in the country. So really a very rapid rate of growth, which we have to accommodate. Next. This is from some work that was done a few years ago, the Wake County Transit Plan. If you do the squint test, these colors are basically showing you where the densest activity is right now. So that's a combination of jobs and housing. And then the lighter colors are where there's less dense activity. So that's the way it was in 2017. If you go next. This is the projection of where that density, composite density, so jobs and population will be happening by 2035. So you can see the locations that it's expected to happen. And of course, those follow many of the corridors that we're looking at today. If you go next. And this is a projection of the level of congestion and which locations would have congestion in the future too. So, growth is coming. It's likely to be focused in certain areas. And this is the projection of how it would impact traffic congestion. So go next. So the big choice was, how should the region grow? How should Raleigh grow? And the choice has been made to grow more around transit instead of growing more around driving. So that's the choice, and that's what's driving the decision to invest in bus rapid transit, and which is now leading to this investigation of what does it mean to grow more around transit instead of to grow more around driving. Next. Okay, so quick reminder, this is the corridor that we're looking at. This is showing, the connection from downtown, past Shaw University, heading south down Wilmington, and then making a connection through some shopping districts around Chapel Oak Square, and then heading down to Garner Station, so around North South Station. So that's the alignment as it's kind of set right now. There is a next round of engineering, which is beginning in the next couple of months, which will kind of do due diligence around some of these details. But what we're also looking at is the potential station locations, which you can just kind of see with the dotted circles. But there are a number of locations along this corridor where the stations, new stations and new transportation facilities may start to shift some of the land uses or generate new opportunities for investment. So next. And as we walk into the process of station area planning, we want to bring certain themes to the table, and it'd be great to hear, what themes you think are important. But these are the ones that we've been working on so far. Next. So stronger mobility across station areas, and that means walking, biking, recreational movement as well. So it's not just for commuting, but actually to get exercise for health purposes. We also want to make sure it's an accessible station area as well. So that means that people with different levels of personal mobility are still able to get around the station areas effectively. Next. We're looking at a diversity of development, and that means different uses and activities, so housing, but different types and scales of housing, as well as affordable housing, as well as other kinds of uses, so potential for retail, potential for hotel, employment uses and activities too. Next. We want to have really active streets and public spaces, a network of spaces that people can use, enjoy, meet, and really looking at streets as being, really high quality places as well. Streets should be attractive, should be kind of destinations in their own right. Next. We're also looking at equity, and this is often most obviously about housing, making sure that there is housing for the broadest range of incomes as possible. But equity is also about jobs, accessing jobs, providing jobs within corridors. It's also about community services. So we want to make sure that there are places for all of those elements in the conversation. Next. And then also sustainable landscapes. This is a great way to kind of restore natural systems, invest in habitat, but also create really attractive places too. So a wide range of landscape types or interventions which can work at the level of individual homes, but also can be how we address streets and public spaces. And as we go through this process, we're encouraging people to tell us what they think is important too. So, we can come onto this in a minute or two, but what would you like to see more of in your neighborhood, where you live, where you work, maybe, where you're part of an institution within the corridor. But looking at entertainment, places to eat, shopping options, those kind of activities, housing choices, job opportunities, city amenities like libraries or other kinds of services, but then also the range of public spaces, sustainable spaces, or trails that you would like to see. So all of these are on the table, and other things maybe as well. So, it'd be great if you let us know which of these you think are important, and then also other things that you think could come into the corridor. So next. And there are some thoughts here on, what equitable transit-oriented development actually means. Go next. And the city has, well-established set of policies and a guidebook from a couple of years ago. But that really looks at new zoning rules that can help achieve equity objectives around BRT routes, really about kind of helping more people live in proximity to transit, but supporting pedestrian-friendly uses and activities, and encouraging the provision of affordable housing. So next. And there are some particular locations that were designated with an overlay, and these are locations where if there is development, which is a little taller than the existing base zoning, there is the requirement to provide affordable housing. So, it's really an incentive. So people can build taller, but within that taller development, there has to be an affordable housing provision. Next. And then there's a range of housing tools and programs that exist today. But part of this process is also to explore, are there other tools that can support affordable housing within this corridor and for, be generally applicable within Raleigh. So we're doing something of a review as part of this process to understand what other tools could be brought to bear to add to this menu of resources. And I think it's important these resources are available to address existing affordable housing, naturally occurring affordable housing that's out there within the marketplace, as well as to support new affordable housing. Okay, next. So I think we just want to do a quick kind of skim over a couple of maps, and then we can get into a conversation. So we wanted to do a quick overview tour in a little more detail of what's included. And these maps are kind of focusing on connectivity. So where are the existing transit connections? Where are the bike connections? Where are the trails? But also what's in existing plans today. So we're looking at kind of maybe a picture of what the world could look like in 5 or 10 years' time. But we want to understand what else is needed. This is the time to think about specifically how do we connect to station areas and improve connections within those station areas. But you can see here, this is the segment from Shore University extending south from downtown through a couple of proposed stations, and then kind of heading south. Come next. And then you can see how the route comes down Wilmington, and then the proposal, which is subject to due diligence this year and further rounds of engineering study, comes through Chapman Oak Square, past International Foods, and then down to Garner Station. But I think you can see here, there were a lot of connections close to downtown, but as you move further south into areas that were previously industrial and maybe a little more suburban today, that the number of kind of bike and pedestrian connections and trails really falls away. There's quite a rich network close to downtown and connecting the existing parks, but as you move south, there are fewer of them. So let's go next. And this again, just an overview of the overlay, the transit overlay. So the purple lines, this is the future land use map. So it's kind of the goals of the city as laid out in a map, and then the overlay showing how it relates to those future land use goals. Next. So yeah, I think we wanted to open it up, and Julia, do you want to kind of take us through this, really just to kind of open it up, see if people have any questions for us before we get into some of the questions that we're interested in?
Yes, it looks like John McCann has raised his hand. John, did you want to type your question or voice your question?
Sure, I'll go ahead and voice it.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. And certainly a presentation like this is supposed to accentuate the positives. But could you point out some of the downsides of this undertaking?
Interesting question.
Boy, yeah, interesting way of I guess we like this kind of stuff. So we're seeing fewer downsides, but we acknowledge challenges. So amongst the challenges I think we want to take on is how can people really effectively kind of move around and walk from different parts of the corridor, walk and bike so that they can get to all of the assets and resources, but also get to transit itself. There are a lot of highways. There are big highways. There are some historic industrial uses and big footprint industrial uses. So it's not always easy to get around. So that's a challenge. So we want to kind of help overcome that challenge. I think we're also acknowledging that there may be concerns about the effect of this on the existing housing market and existing residents. So we are challenged and kind of accept the challenge to find strategies that can respond to some of those kind of considerations. Yeah, I think we're interested in challenges rather than downsides. In terms of transit, it's a great opportunity for people to be able to move around more effectively, more quickly, be less dependent on a car. It helps us provide more walkable, attractive spaces. It's an opportunity to think about all of the services and amenities and types of housing that people would like to see in this area. So, it's an opportunity to kind of steer change, and a certain amount of change may be coming anyway, but it's an opportunity to kind of be intentional and say what kind of change people would like to see.
All right, thank you.
I see there are some other questions in the chat.
Yes, we have a question in the chat. Have there been any decisions on max heights along the southern BRT line? And if not, when will that be decided?
Yeah, I don't think we can say there are, other than the overlay. Maybe Hannah, do you want to talk about the overlay a little bit and what that means? And then we can talk about what this plan process will do.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, there's existing zoning all along the line. That includes base zoning, which has its own height limit to building height built in. And then as you saw in the slides, there are some areas along the corridor where the transit overlay district have been applied. That includes a height bonus, which you may or may not be familiar with. There's 2 of them, and then they allow the future developer builder to go beyond that base zoning height limit in exchange for, one is for affordable units and the other is for locating employment uses along the corridor. So that's kind of where we are right now. There's potential to look at tweaking kind of the location of that and looking at land use guidance that's different as part of this process. But that would be decided as part of this process in future iterations. I don't know, Chris, if you want to talk more about.
Yeah, sure. And I think the next stage in this process, we will be looking at illustrating what could potentially happen in some locations in the future, particularly where there's kind of vacant land or maybe surface parking lots if things are really underutilized, and looking at options for what those heights could be. And I think that's part of this process, is to have a conversation about, well, what should the heights be, and how does that play out in terms of variations in different locations? If you are going to have some buildings that are taller than others, where should those be located? And should they be around stations? Is that where it makes sense? So I think it's an open conversation. There are, some previous plans that are in place. So, there's zoning, but there's Southern Gateway plan from 5 or 6 years ago that gave some guidance, but I think a lot changed in the last 5 or 6 years. So there may be some revisiting of those.
All right, well, do we have any more questions before we move on? And if you have more questions throughout, we can also answer those if you're inspired and you have any to drop in the chat.
Are there any more questions in the chat?
There's no questions in the chat now.
Okay. Did John put his hand up again? Did I see that?
Oh,
Let me piggyback off that last question.
Mm-hmm.
Now is the time for folks in the community to weigh in and have their say. Piggybacking off that last question, what other things are you looking to hear about in terms of like the heights of things or brightness of lights? Give us some of those things we could bring to the table.
Yeah, actually, well, let's do this. Let's move on to the next slide because we have, a set of questions we want to have people think about. So there are questions here on kind of connections and transportation, but John, let's build off kind of where you're taking us. Towards the bottom, there are some questions around which locations do you think will change or see new development in the future? So that's like, it's going to happen, a bit of a prediction. Which locations do you think will change? Then are there any locations you think should change? And then let's talk about what that could be. And then there are other places that shouldn't change. You actually think, could stay the way they are. So it'll be interesting, maybe to open that conversation. Maybe the first question would, which places do you think will change? Are there particular intersections, streets, sites you're aware of that you think will change?
Yeah. This is Ken Thompson. I'm with J. Davis Architects. And we currently have a project under construction at the northwest quadrant of Chapanoke and the proposed line. And that is housing about, I can't remember exactly, it's between 80 and 120 multifamily affordable units. And when we went through the process, this line at that time was on the back burner. And right before we got our construction plans approved, the city came and said, uh-oh, we moved this up. And, we need to have you guys make a bigger, better right-of-way dedication for the future line. So I think, if I read the plan correctly, it shows that there's going to be a stop there. And I think it would be great if we could make sure there is one there. There's a shopping center on the east side that would essentially have to be demolished. I don't know how the city's going to work that through. But I think that's definite spot for a stop.
Okay. And so do you think, and, for anybody to weigh in on this, are there locations that, just given some of the dynamics within Raleigh generally, but this southern corridor, I mean, obviously development is happening. There are a number of sites kind of, within Ghana and also, within Raleigh where things are kind of moving forward. There's construction happening. But are there particular locations you think it should happen that, in the next, and I think we're looking out 10, 15 years as well.
Yeah.
Other locations you think should change?
Is there kind of like a standard or a guideline of the distance between stops?
It varies a little because you've got some existing infrastructure, but generally the stops are kind of, for this kind of system, you generally want them to be half a mile apart, but there's a couple of places where they're kind of squeezing together. And I think in the next round, this due diligence, there's a general sense of where the stations and the station areas will be, but they are not, it's not a pin in the
Okay.
at this point.
Yeah, because if you move south down the Tryon, if you look at what's going on there right now, there's some very underutilized properties, like car lots and stuff. And if the BRT is going to be there, I mean, obviously, those property owners should definitely be involved. I invited several of them tonight, but I don't see any of them attending. Because really, I mean, right now it's like it's zoned IX or whatever, and it seems like if you're on the BRT, it should be zoned higher density with a lot more affordable housing involved.
Yeah, and I think some people who are representing some of the properties in that corridor came to our in-person open houses last week. So, but yeah, if there are others,
I did send them that invite last week. I'm not 100% sure if they showed up.
a few people did, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Well, we're also going to have, this is round 1 of 3. So there's more opportunities for engagement, more opportunities to spread the word and to get involved. So In January, we'll have, you know, ideally another webinar as well. So if this is a good format for folks, you know, we'll definitely be able to do this same type of format again. And if you have suggestions on a format that would better reach some of those people or other groups, you know, please let us know, drop your email in the chat, and we'd love to connect.
Okay, we can do that.
I do want to, you know, just give people the opportunity to kind of revisit the question of, are there locations that should stay the same and shouldn't change? Don't say they don't do anything to improve, but are there locations that generally you kind of feel like they're in pretty good shape, and it's about enhancements rather than kind of larger scale change?
As folks get their mind around that question, Mr. Hall, Ken mentioned a shopping center that is going to have to be done away with. Do we know of other locations that are going to be similarly impacted? And I'm all of my questions, I'm representing Shaw University and the surrounding area.
Yeah. I think outside of the locations that you've highlighted, the BRT is proposed to operate on existing rights of way. And there may be some kind of bumping around the edges, you know, just to kind of fit in stations, but it's within existing streets, really. There is some City of Raleigh lands that the route would go through as well. But yeah, I can't think of anything, you know, other than, you know, that southern end, areas you've kind of highlighted. You know, most of, in fact, all of it is on existing streets.
And just to add to that, and I think maybe address one of the questions I saw from David in the chat, the work to do the design and engineering for the actual route itself is a separate project and a separate project team kind of working parallel, that we can connect you all with, put some links in the chat. And they're still kind of at the 30,000 foot view, that line that you see on that map. You know, as mentioned, they're doing some due diligence about it as part of the process of refining that down a bit. But just wanted to kind of put some context on what groups are working on what, and you can look out for a link in the chat with more info.
And I think it's fair to say that that next stage in the engineering design process is initiating in spring or early next year, and will run through the year. And I'm just, you know, there's likely to be some level of kind of engagement through that process too.
Yep.
Right. Okay. There is a question of kind of what do people need in order to be ready for bus rapid transit? You know, existing residents, existing businesses. What do we think? Anybody have any ideas on what we could be doing to kind of ensure people, you know, really tap into it and, you know, benefit from it in the future?
You know, could be like, you know, are there a lot of gaps in the sidewalk? You know, would you like to be able to ride your bike there? More housing closer to those stations.
Or maybe it's something along the lines of, you know, related to businesses. You as a business need to be prepared for this new service. Lots of different potential interpretations of that.
Yeah, I know there's another project at 601 Tryon that's under construction now. That's all apartments that would be on the west side of the proposed line, north of or south of Tryon. And so that's a good use, and I think that's something that they can use in their marketing to get people to come and rent there.
Mhm.
Because, you can live there and have a quick ride to downtown, but you also have you're right near a shopping center and everything.
Mhm.
It's the parcels on the east side of south of Tryon. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 large parcels there that are really underutilized, and I think the city needs to focus on getting the best uses in there. And like I said, I've talked to we have been in touch with a property owner there. They reached out to us and they want to know how this would impact their property.
Mm.
Especially, and they were more worried about the taking of the right of way and building the road and everything. And we kind of spun it for them like, this is an opportunity for you. You're gonna be right there. You have a car lot or whatever, some underutilized use, and the city's bringing you a prime transit corridor that is going to increase the value of your property.
Yeah, and I think in some locations, this route provides new access where there's none right now. So, essentially creating a new street for the, where the BRT will be using it. But it also means that there's a pedestrian and a bike corridor, and it means that there's another point of access into some of the properties. And access from Wilmington itself can be really difficult just given the weight of traffic, the whole environment, which is why some sites kind of have service roads or another street running parallel to Wilmington. So this is an opportunity in some ways to kind of enhance access. And then, the whole question is what kinds of activities or uses are kind of appropriate there. And that's what we're interested in. We'll be exploring as we move into the next phases. Okay. Just want to keep it open still, see if there are other questions that people may have. Okay. Maybe another question from us is, who else should we be talking to within this corridor? Who would you advise is kind of important to engage in this process? If you have any suggestions for, local organizations, resident groups, or others who, we can reach out to directly, then, drop those in the chat as well. And we can pick those up.
Yeah, that's a good call out, Mr. Hall. I don't have any right now, but that's something that I will put my mind around, and whether it's me giving the information to y'all or me just reaching out on my own to these groups.
Yeah,
my part to make sure folks are aware of the process.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out and let us know, if there's anything we can do to help with that process. We're open to doing it. And yeah, any help you can give, that's great. Publicize away. We want to kind of share as much information as possible.
Gotcha.
Ken, I see you put the Renaissance Homeowners Association in there.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anybody on the call from them, but
Mhm.
I mean, if you look at the density of and actually we have an ex-employee who lives there. I think a current employee actually. I mean, I think it's because of that density they have, I think it's really important to talk to them. They might be, if they work downtown, they might be, regular users of this service.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely spoken to a handful of residents. But yeah, that's a good thought to speak to the homeowners association as well.
Yep, and I'll try to get my Chapanote affordable people to get involved too. I'll keep pushing them.
Great. Thank you. Thanks
Yes,
for that.
thank you so much.
Should we have in mind for that just folks who are directly on that line, or would you recommend branching off from that?
Yeah, I mean, they don't have to be immediately adjacent.
No.
You know, a 5 or 10 minute walk, that's fine. Within half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. There's no hard boundary, but there's an area that you could see people accessing the system, and as a result, there's an area that could be influenced by the system over the long term as well. So, yeah, it can be broad. You don't have to be kind of right on the line itself.
Okay.
Yeah, and then also just groups that may be interested or invested in the area. Like I know, John, we had talked about like the Shaw U alumni, would have a particular interest in the future of the area. So groups like that as well.
Sure.
Right. Okay. Well, should we move on to the
Sure.
slide? I think, we want to remind people kind of where we are in the process. Hannah took us through this kind of a little bit earlier, but, we are still relatively early in the process. We've been kind of understanding all of the plans that have been made for this area. There was a Southern Gateway plan. There was a Dick's Edge plan from a year or two ago. There is the equitable TOD guidance. So really understanding all of those things. And then our, baselining activities, understanding physical conditions, but also market analysis too. So our team is looking at kind of housing and retail, office, industrial conditions through the area, what's happening with kind of new investments, what the rent and value trends have been. Are there affordability issues? Where are they concentrated? Demographics in terms of household income. So how all that fits together to see if there's an affordability gap. So that's all happening right now, as well as some real investigation of physical conditions, sidewalks, streets, bikeways. What's the network? How's it all fit together? And that's really leading us to then we're beginning the station area planning. And it's an options phase, really to understand what the alternatives and options may be, so that we can then bring those back to you in a few months' time. And then that process, once we have feedback, it will lead to kind of more specific recommendations, some choices, and then really looking at implementation as well. How do we get some of these goals achieved? Obviously the role of city government, but then what's the role of private sector, nonprofits, and others in the process? So yeah, next.
Yes, I think we have one last question in the chat.
All right, great.
So how is the town of Garner involved in planning and executing the plan?
Sure. Hannah, do you want to address that?
Sure, yeah. So this station area planning process is a City of Raleigh project. Obviously in communication with Garner, but they have their own sort of land use plan, and actually comprehensive plan too, I believe, near adoption, if it hasn't been adopted already. And then so that's sort of the answer to that. In terms of kind of transit engineering, I think some of the contacts, some of the staff that are listed in that link I shared will be able to talk with you more on that. But we're really focused on the City of Raleigh here.
I can concur with your comments, because we have several projects in Garner, and I talked to Garner, and I said, looking at 601 Tryon, and they only had a 50-foot right-of-way dedication along the shared property line. And I talked to them, and they essentially said, well, we don't have the street sections and the infrastructure and those kinds of things in our UDO. And unfortunately, we couldn't impose upon them the City of Raleigh's wishes. So unfortunately, the people on the east side of the dotted line have to make a bigger sacrifice right away wise and everything than the people on the west side that are in Garner, which was kind of disappointing, but you think they would want to be a partner in it, but it kind of seems like they were limited by what they had in their UDO.
Well, if there are any other questions in the chat, we'll address those. In the meantime, there's some key information here on this last slide. As a reminder, this is an outline of the process. The project was initiated in September of this year, and we have been understanding the foundation set by previous plans, investigating the existing context, as well as carrying out the initial rounds of public engagement and stakeholder engagement. From here, we'll be starting to investigate plans for areas around the proposed BRT station locations. If you go to Raleigh nc.gov and search for Planning Southern, that'll take you to the project's webpage, where you will find an online survey, which you could also write this direct link down. Or I guess we could probably post that in the chat too, but you can find all of that at RaleighNC.gov in case you forget. Thank you, Hannah. And then you can reach out directly to Hannah for questions. I also put my email in the chat. Just a reminder, I'm Julia and this is Eric. We're helping with the public engagement. So if you have groups that you think we should reach out to, or if you would like to continue the conversation, don't hesitate to send me an email, julia@neighboringconcepts.com. And Hannah has also put her email in the chat. So direct questions to Hannah will probably get you more answers, but I'm happy to set up meetings with Hannah directly as well. So, all right. Well,
Thanks
any
everyone
other
for
remarks?
Thank you.
Yes.
your time.
Thank you for taking your time this evening.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Ken. Thank you all who and David for asking such insightful questions. We really appreciate it. So, all right. Well, and we will definitely be in touch. You know, we'll be posting more in the new year as the project and the process continues. So I hope that you come back for round 2. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and have a lovely evening and weekend. And if we don't talk to you, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.